feel like Jeremy clapped a few times there.
I think I clapped twice.
So should I go with the first one or the second one?
Go with the second one.
Why did you just what was going on in your head
I don't know.
that was a good idea?
I'm sure David will get it worked out.
I'm already messed up because of it, honestly. This episode's just already going to go off the rails from the very beginning. Sort of like the last few did. What episode is this, by the way? Is this 81, I think?
I think so. Yeah.
Episode 81 of Three Brothers Talking. I'm David.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Jeremy. Why do you always laugh at how I
Jeremy's
say
struggling
that?
to get up to speed. No, I was laughing because it felt like you were 20 minutes late to get in there.
I was here.
Oh, all right. We just a peek behind the curtain. Whenever we're remote podcasting here, we are very highly technical in that to sync up the audio tracks, we just use all of us clapping on the microphone to help us sync things up. And Jeremy threw a double clap in this time, which is sure to mess things up.
He clapped once and then he wasn't confident in it, so he clapped a second time. So it was he was like, all right, I'm feeling in this one. Yeah.
So that's just gonna be that's gonna be tough. I'm gonna try to. We'll see what happens in the post phase of that. So this is episode 81, though. The post phase. That's not the right word for it, but
you can fix anything in post. Yeah,
you can try. That's for certain. That's half of my day job is doing that very thing for people.
There you go. So you're a professional.
Exactly. Well, tonight we've got a couple fun things to talk about. The first is that I'll mention that we do have social media that is sparingly used, and that'll come into play in our next topic. But if you don't follow us, you could follow us on Instagram is probably the best place to do it. And it's at 3BT Pod. So whenever you do that, you get to take part in fun Instagram polls, like the one that we did based off of last episode, where Jeremy confessed his love for Bigfoot and his current obsession with Bigfoot. I was waiting for him to object to that, but
no objection. He takes,
Sorry.
He's taking it in stride.
Hey, so first off, there actually was a lag for a second on our amazing feed. Secondly, I don't see why there's an issue with anything. Are you saying that I didn't see there's an issue on Facebook or something? I barely look at Facebook.
No, I was just waiting for you to object to the fact that I said you had a love and obsession with Bigfoot.
I like watching Bigfoot documentaries. I will not apologize for enjoying watching something like that.
Let me ask you this question, because this is the question that I asked on Instagram. Is Bigfoot or some kind of Bigfoot-like creature real? That's the question I asked. Jeremy, how would you answer that?
So, I mean, it depends what you mean. If you say Bigfoot-like creature, you could say, like, there's a millions of different ones. Like, you could say an ape is generally like a Bigfoot-like creature, like a gorilla.
I'm obviously not talking about that.
It's
I'm talking about a creature.
We're not talking about a gorilla. No.
Do gorillas exist? Yes.
See, 100%. There you go. Your poll's done.
I'm asking, is there some kind of land animal that is large and hairy and we haven't yet identified it? Like, it can't be a species we already know, obviously. So it had to be some kind of other species. Does that exist?
I don't know, man.
You afraid to answer?
I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring it out.
Jeremy's on.
Okay.
Jeremy's on. Like, well, you should have seen the
lot
documentary last night.
I think I will say I think 99% of them are hoaxes, but every once in a while something comes up and I'm like, well, that could be something interesting. So
Jeremy's on the maybe train.
I'm on the maybe train.
Which was an answer that was provided. Now, our listenership got back to us, and 67% of people answered yes to the question.
Oh, there you go. See, I'm not that.
But I don't think that 67% of people really believe that.
I think that's people patronizing Jeremy.
Yeah. I have a lot of fans out there, Andrew. What can I say? People are getting Jeremy tattoos and stuff. So
They're getting Jeremy high-fiving Bigfoot. That's what they're getting tattooed.
Yeah.
dude, that'd be a sick tattoo.
Well,
Don't be hating.
Hey, yeah.
You'd want that tattoo.
I guess
Get Skylar to do that. I can get Skylar to do that tomorrow.
yeah, instead of the tattoo you're going to get tomorrow, just switch it up and say, I'd like to be high-fiving Bigfoot. Can you just...
Forget that.
Jeremy, you're getting your tat tomorrow.
I'm getting
That's
tattoo
exciting.
number 2.
Tattoo
Are you scared, Jeremy?
Not really. It's gonna be bigger than my other one, but it's at a hideable spot, so that works out well.
Do you think it's going to hurt more?
Nah, I have a lot of extra stuff.
It's
where
gonna
so.
hurt more.
You're
It's
getting
going
your
on.
entire.
It's going on his
more.
chest for the record. That was like the weirdest way to. I don't know. That could.
Oh, I thought it was
didn't want
his
everyone
entire
I don't know.
face.
I didn't know how to say body parts.
Well,
it's not going like it's going. Yeah, going on my chest.
You could have the way that you said I have extra stuff there. Like that could have been I don't know your butt or something like that, which would be
Whoa, this is a family-friendly podcast. Don't say that word on this podcast.
bottom. My bad.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Booty. My kids listen
That's
to
true.
this
I'm
podcast.
sorry
on-
about that.
Are you going on the peck? What are you doing?
Yeah, left pec.
Left
Always
peck?
the left.
Yeah.
Everything
That's
I
it.
have is gonna be on the
It'll
left
hurt.
side.
He's more
left-hand side.
confident. It's a little stronger on the left side. So
Left side is strong
It'll-
side. I feel like I do better push-ups on that
It'll
side.
it'll definitely hurt more than your first one because your first one was on your like your upper arm,
Shoulder.
which isn't sensitive at all.
Well, and even then, I had more muscle at that moment when I got that one than I do now. But
Is,
it should be a good night. Faith,
is
Faith gets to
Faith-
come with me.
Yeah, I was like, is
Faith
Faith
gets
going
to
with you?
experience it.
Okay.
Yep.
There you go.
And then I get to hang out with a friend of the pod, Jeffy B. Afterward.
Oh, I thought you were about to
So that's
say
another fun
at
night.
the tattoo. And I was like, that's weird.
No,
Maybe he's getting one as
no,
well.
afterward. Shout out.
So if you do get the Bigfoot tattoo, I mean, the design you have is cool, but if you do want to do the other one instead,
If we get a pretty good drawing of a Bigfoot tattoo, I might get a small one, like a Bigfoot high fiving.
I'd think
I
about
that'd
it.
be cool.
Let's do a poll of what should be
We have
Jeremy's
to, it has to
third
be a good
tattoo.
quality, and I have to approve it. I have to approve said tattoo.
What? So did they give you time? Like, how long are you gonna be? You gonna
They're
be
saying
under?
so. Basically, they fought. I go 5:30. They're thinking 6:30 at the latest. So I reckon an hour and a
Okay.
half to 2
So
hours tops.
it'll be relatively quick.
he's gonna
one.
move quick. Yeah,
Yeah, it won't be too bad.
Yeah.
It's all black, so it's not that bad.
yeah. Well, Jeremy's got all kinds of news going on lately because he not only loves Bigfoot and he not only is getting a tattoo, but he also just got back from Colorado.
But I have a question though. Like, yeah, I have a question though on the Bigfoot
Well,
thing.
just
So,
do a
like,
second on Bigfoot here.
Yeah, like
Well, no, Colorado can relate to Bigfoot because I have more news about that after this. Keep going.
because he saw him.
No, just keep going with your question, Andrew.
No, my question is like, so you're saying a species like Bigfoot. So at what threshold do we qualify a like Bigfoot species? Like, is it
That'd be a
basically
David
like
thing.
if you saw a gorilla that was, like, because like gorillas can walk up on 2 legs.
Yeah.
Like, so like at what point, like that's what I'm saying is like,
Is it
how
just
close do we
location
have to
based,
be?
or-
Yeah.
I mean, there's something called the what's it called? Goodness, now I can't remember it. It's in Florida in the Everglades. There's Grassman in Ohio that could be something. Minerva Monster. There's many different things.
Well, those are all urban legends. Jeremy,
I
so.
don't think there's a chance that we have a Bigfoot in Minerva, Ohio.
The skunk
Yeah.
ape they're saying is in the Everglades. So
there could be something in
just
the
wanna-
Everglades for sure.
yeah.
I just want
so
to
there you
know,
go.
like, definitively. I like to be analytical. Like, definitively, what do we qualify as a?
I would
That's a
say
Bigfoot.
it has to be taller than a man standing upright.
Yeah.
It's got to be taller than a man standing
All right.
upright.
and
And
like
it's
is it
gotta walk-
location
it's
based?
gotta, like,
It's got to walk
upright,
upright
right?
to be a true Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, I don't know. At least in the historical sense of what we mean when we say Bigfoot.
So,
we say
are
like
we
a hairy
saying-
man in the woods.
Yeah.
Are we saying basically hairy, like larger than a male, bigger than a gorilla, and just not in like Central Africa where gorillas currently live? I looked that up on my highly technical Google
No,
search
I think
engine.
I think that it also has to be probably a species we haven't seen before. Because if it was just a gorilla in Ohio, you'd be like, oh, somebody brought a gorilla
Yeah.
over here. and let it loose.
Yeah, I was like, it couldn't be some kind of line of gorilla.
You got to see
like
it and say, what is
yeah.
that? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm just gonna. I mean, it depends on what you're qualifying it as. I would say during that definition, I would say that could be a possibility. Yes, there's a lot of area in Canada, especially that no one sees, that's uninhabited.
Canada's a fair point. It could be some kind of snow
That's
monster.
where
Canada.
very easily, especially like that. And most of the sightings are in the Pacific Northwest, which is pretty close to all that uninhabited land.
You dream it up. It's possible up in Canada.
All things are possible through verses taken out of context.
That's right.
and
That's what my keychain says.
and all things are possible with Bigfoots in Canada.
Yes, Jeremy, what was your Colorado trip Bigfoot link?
So I got back. So we were in Colorado Springs, nice little place. Went to a nice restaurant called the Rabbit Hole. Met a nice guy at the Denver Biscuit Company next morning and got to hang out with my wife. It was fun. Went to a hot spring for a friend's wedding, which is great. But on the way back, I got home and I was looking at YouTube and I don't know, I had a suggestion. It said, here's a documentary. So I clicked on it and it was like, hey, it's a Bigfoot in Pikes Peak, which is in Colorado Springs, like not far from us. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I could have gone to see Bigfoot while I was there.
It was a video of like some sighting or what?
Yeah, like a sighting. It's like Monster Quest had like an episode on it. There's a bunch of different things. Monster Quest is a bunch of urban legends, which are pretty good. And then Small Town Monsters is a pretty good pretty good little channel that has some good stuff.
So how was it in
There's some language on it, so we'll throw that disclaimer out.
How was it in a natural hot spring? Is that pretty cool?
Oh, dude, it was so natural being in that hot spring.
I've never been.
No, it was like 100. I think they said one of them was like 140. No, not that high. It was like over
140.
degrees.
Yeah, that would
That's
boil
not right.
you.
I don't. No, that won't. Boiling's like what's boiling? 300
Or what's
degrees.
boiling?
Boiling's 212.
But Celsius is 100.
Boy, we're stupid.
I'm gonna look it up.
I know a hot tub's like 100, right?
Yeah.
Boiling water occurs at 212 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wouldn't boil you, but that'd be really hot.
It was really hot. You can ask Faith. I could throw in a disclaimer. She like a lot of times we were getting out of the water, or she was like halfway out, so she'd cool down.
I know anything like above 101, 102 hot tub wise, I can't tolerate that.
Yeah.
They had a nice little cascade pool. We got to sit in an infinity pool in the mountains with everyone in the hot springs. It was nice, especially after hurting myself last week at soccer, to sit in a hot spring.
Yeah. Jeremy got back into playing soccer and immediately pulled muscles all up and down his leg. Which
if you call it playing,
that's what happens.
I call
dude.
it just not getting hurt, and then I got hurt.
That's just what happens. It's part of the game. Part of the game.
Yeah,
guys, I feel like this is a Jeremy's life episode. Is this like all about me?
We're just getting
Speaking
updates.
of something that Jeremy holds very near and dear, Joe Rogan.
That's not the truth. They're going to go like eschatology, Dave.
No, something that really strikes you to your core, something that really defines you.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan defined me as a man.
Yeah, I mean, Jocko Willink, those are the next tattoos you're getting. You, Bigfoot,
okay, let's
Joe
go back.
Rogan.
I do not throw Jocko Willink. I would not put Jocko Willink in the same. Even Joe Rogan's in a thing all by himself.
Well, that's true. We need to set the table a little bit here. Sorry.
Yeah, David, set the table for us.
We'll set the table. The topic that we're going to talk about is basically why are Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson so popular among men? Maybe Jocko Willink as well. Even Christian men. Why are they so popular? Because I don't know, I think you might, I mean this, I don't mean this as an insult, but like you probably aren't that well versed in the internet in current culture if you aren't aware of the fact that like guys like Joe Rogan, Jocko Willink, Jordan Peterson have massive followings, just massive followings of really predominantly men. And so the question is, why do we think those guys are so popular right now among men? And especially, I think that Christian men in particular love those guys in different ways for different reasons, even though none of those guys are at least orthodox Christians. Yet they're so popular. They're so beloved. So that's the table set. That's what we're going to talk about. Now, Jeremy, your disclaimer is what? That you were getting to there.
See, I don't know. I don't put Jocko in the same category for the reason that he I don't know. I don't want to say he's actually done stuff, but
I don't think he actually
even the way he
tries to be in
writes
the
his
same
books
category.
and everything else is basically like, hey, men be men. The stuff I've read and listened to him, it seems like men be men and lead and take ownership of what you're doing and stop crying about it.
It's very Jordan
as far
Peterson.
As the other people that latch on.
Yeah.
Well, and even Jordan Peterson, I don't even. Okay, as far as the reason why men latch on to them, let's go back.
Well, let me address what you're saying right there real fast, because I think they're not the same people. Like Joe Rogan is not the same. He doesn't scratch the same itch that Jocko Willink scratches for people, nor does Jordan Peterson. Like,
correct.
Like Jordan Peterson is an intellectual, and Jocko Willink is like the military guy, and then Joe Rogan is like he's the frat boy.
Comedian.
So they are different.
TV star.
They're different. The reason that I lump them together for this question is just because I see the popularity that all three of them have. So I think that they strike similar chords, but in different ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see
that's
I'm not discrediting it totally. I just want to say that of the three, if I were gonna sit there and like, I guess if I was gonna say, hey, like read or listen to this stuff, I put Joe and Jordan in a different area Jordan and Jocko in a different area than Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't waste time reading a book by Joe Rogan. Probably wouldn't be the most,
or I guess just material in general with podcasts and whatnot. From an actual like stimulating standpoint, and to actually be something good.
Well, and I think to his credit, as even, I mean, he's not a listener of the podcast, I assume. But Joe Rogan, I assume, is not going to put himself in the same category of those two men either. I think that he understands, like, one of those guys is is Willink, Navy SEAL, I think. So he's like, I'm not a Navy SEAL. I'm also not a PhD brilliant professor. I'm just a comedian.
Right.
So different guys. But why are they?
I don't think he would either.
Why are they popular?
Are you asking me or Andrew first? Who wants to start it off?
Whoever's manlier can go first.
I was gonna say it's basically, I think men flock in, as far as following goes, because the Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan do not, like, they had kind of unleashed, and they got in this wave of not being afraid to be men, and be basically standing up that platform of, like, they, especially Jordan Peterson, his whole rise to fame came about his stand up against identity politics, and the whole, kind of, especially like how we use our freedom of speech, and how we're supposed to, how there should not be any limitations on that in society. So that's where, like, basically he became a platform of, like, anybody going against the society norm, and talking against anything that realmed freedom of speech. And same thing with Joe Rogan. I think he has a platform now where he invites virtually everybody on who are intellectuals and other people like that, and he just gives them a platform to be able to speak freely.
Or sometimes pseudo intellectuals, but yeah.
Well, like, it's a wide variety of people, but, like, regardless of who the person is, like, they're able to speak freely. And that's why I think people like
whether
it.
Whether it's Bernie Sanders or I don't know, Ben Shapiro has been on there. I was trying to think of somebody the opposite of Bernie Sanders.
And, like, scientists and doctorates and green berets and military people. Well,
I think your point there, Andrew, is well taken. Like that both of them, especially Jordan Peterson, like he did become famous. He was just a random professor in Canada. And then he became famous because Canada passes a bill about compelled speech regarding gender and stuff. And he started to speak out against that. And then he just didn't care to take a stand and just say what he believed about it. And so I think that there is a bit of a hunger. And I think it does connect with men like that. There's a respect for other guys that take stands for things.
Yeah.
That have a backbone, that like stand up and are not afraid to be maligned or not afraid to be attacked.
Face like personal consequences or something like that. Yeah.
And I think that Christian men probably feel a bit of a draw to that because I don't know how many great examples we have of that in the church, of taking stands in really firm, really loving ways that show a backbone for things, a really godly backbone. But I don't know. I think that's something that's missing, that those two guys in particular strike a chord with people, I think. Jeremy, were you going to say something?
No, and I think that's a good point. Like you said, being able to speak freely and be able to stand strong amidst a culture that's going to push back no matter what your view is, or cancel you, whatever what that means. I think that for so long in Christianity, we've had the mindset of being, I'm going to use the word winsome because that's the word we hear, and not necessarily. And I guess there's a time and a place to communicate. And you should always communicate well with gentleness and respect, but also there's a time and place to say, no, that's wrong, and stand firm. And for too long, I don't think that we saw men standing firm on the right things, like things that actually mattered, like how we love our wives, how we serve and stand firm with our kids, how we should be courageous, and how we steward our money, time, and resources, and just even activities, and politics and voting. All that kind of lumps in the way we don't view the household and our jobs, or I guess it's been, I don't say vilified, because I don't think it's been vilified completely. I just think it's been absent. And in the absence, something has to fill the void.
Yeah, like you're saying, the church hasn't really stepped in a strong way. And amidst culture has confused the topics of what does a household even mean? And what do all these things even mean? And the church has, in a lot of ways, I think, I don't know, given shallow responses, or given kind of weak responses, or half-hearted ones, or compromised responses. And so like there is a hunger, I think, for people to for the church and the leaders of the church to just be clear about, like, no, this is what we believe and we're going to stick to it. And that has certainly been missing for a long time, I think.
I guess that it was like that view doesn't really enter the public sphere much, it seems. Like the view of like a strong view from the church just does not. It seems like it's operating in two separate worlds at this point. Where like the church does not have a figure that, you know, as far as people flock to, if that makes sense, in the same way. Like, and so like, if, you know, that's one thing that's interesting to me, that like, I guess you couldn't have that, I guess what I'm trying to say is you can't have that, you know, that central figure if he's not able to step out into the public sphere and really, you know, command that sort of following that these other men do.
That's
I don't know if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, that does. No, I was gonna say, so up until this past year, like, and I would say these men were available. Like, I know John MacArthur's always been pretty standout. up until you really had to stand out. The issue is not necessarily you have a few men like with John MacArthur and Douglas Wilson who have, especially Douglas Wilson, have had almost like become for years been like they do their own thing and we just don't associate with them 100%. Like to a degree we do. John MacArthur a little more so, but like evangelicalism as a whole push these people out from their ranks more than anything else. It seemed that way. Or just cut and run. Like with John MacArthur last year, it seemed like everyone just said, okay, John MacArthur's doing his thing as far as the big
like whenever John MacArthur decided after he had shut his church down, he decided to open his church back up in opposition and there wasn't a whole lot of to your point, Jeremy, there wasn't a whole lot of backup
support
from
I guess I didn't think about
from
that.
the main ranks of evangelicalism, which would be like the Christianity Todays and the Holy Posts or the Gospel Coalitions or gods. There was some here and there, but there wasn't like
it was
you
sparse.
probably saw less articles in support of John MacArthur doing that than you saw in support of his willingness to close in the first place, if that makes sense. Like, and there wasn't even articles that I saw in the wake of it. Like I would have loved to seen articles that said like, hey, we still think you should close your church, but we support our brother John MacArthur for doing what he believes.
Right.
There wasn't really a lot of that either. So I'm not entirely sure what to make of that, to be honest. But it's it is something that
I was just trying to get back to the standpoint of like, even like Joe Rogan, they're somewhat outliers now from a societal standpoint. But people still latch onto them to the degree of, like you said, Andrew and David, they're willing to stand up and give people the opportunity to speak. Granted, not 100% the truth, but for lack of a better phrase, their truth.
Yeah. And I was like, I think they've both become so prevalent in that aspect and like so confident in the platform they have that like basically they're, at this point they're virtually like uncancelable or whatever that word would be. Because they have such a following built up and, they know that, regardless of who they put on, especially in Joe Rogan's sense, like whoever is able to speak freely and, all that, like that's going to get the general support that he's built up. So I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic that like literally Joe Rogan can command more views and clicks and listens than any mainstream media platform out there these days. Mm-hmm. On like, daytime news when that runs.
Primetime news. I think if I'm not mistaken, Joe Rogan, the only person who gets more viewers than Joe Rogan on average like episode is like Tucker Carlson. I don't know that anyone else of their average show gets more views, like downloads and stuff like that.
Yeah,
which
and
is
like
remarkable.
You think about it, like Tucker Carlson has a room full of producers and
he's
all
got
that
a whole
that are
network.
scripting a primetime show for him. Whereas Joe Rogan, that all those views are going to a 3-hour interview where he's just talking across
he's
the
just
table
a dude
with somebody.
in his basement with a friend.
Yeah.
And so one part of this I think is the backbone. Like people want to see a backbone because they know that there are things to defend and to stand by. And they also are willing to listen to, listen to these guys, even if they might not be totally right, listen to them just because it's different than what they hear everywhere else. But to dig into why, because again, like none of these guys have it all perfectly together. And if I were to rank them, Joe Rogan is probably the farthest from the truth on so many things. So people still listen to him, and I'm not entirely sure how or like why. And I don't mean that like an insulting way of like, I don't know why you listen to him. I mean that in the way of like, even though like Christians would disagree with him on all kinds of things, he seems to be at least reasonable about some things that Christians want to team up about.
I think it all comes down to his approach on, like even, he's very approachable as far as the conversation goes. And that's how he frames the whole thing and his whole platform now. And so whether you agree with him or not, it's a comfortable situation to wade into and listen or view or whatever, because it's not like, it's not just, I guess, mainstream media people that have an obvious slant on a situation, or people that are just trying to interject and talk over each other. It's like, it's basically like a full, it's like,
it's actually a two-way dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels much more honest, even if it's not all the time.
And even,
yeah.
Even then, like, I mean, depending on the artist and the topic, like, I've listened to all three of them on some way, shape, or form. Depending what we're listening to.
I'll listen to Jocko Willink on all kinds of things.
It comes down to like, there's certain things like, regardless of all these, discernment is required.
Yep.
Like everything we should be listening to as Christians.
Absolutely.
But I mean, the Joe Rogan thing is a good platform. He does a good job. They do a good job with the product overall. Like even like there, I've heard stories like they actually start talking and they just like start recording mid conversation to get it all flowing ahead of time. So from that standpoint, it's good to have the opportunity to have something out there these days that I guess isn't censored.
Well, that's that's basically what we do. So we're good as well. We just
we just literally hit record. We clap a few times.
And clap.
We clap 2 to 3 times, and then
then 2 to 3 claps.
I might clap mid episode. Who knows?
Well, and to go back to what you said, Jeremy, like obviously all these guys, because even if they were Orthodox Christians, they would still require discernment, just like everything that we say requires discernment. But none of these guys are Orthodox Christians, so they require obviously extra discernment. And I want to like, but with I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about like having the backbone. Like, are we saying that men in particular are just drawn to being a jerk? Is that what it is that brings people to this? Is back?
What do you mean by?
I guess what I mean
jerk?
is,
what's your definition?
Let's define having a backbone, I guess, in some ways, so that it's not mistaken for just being a jerk, if that makes sense. Because we're talking here. Let me backtrack one more step. What we're saying is that there's a bit of a vacuum in the church of what feels like prominent, godly, manly examples in a lot of ways. And so we're saying like that we believe, I believe a lot of the reason that Christian men will listen to Jocko Willink about manhood when he talks about being a man, even though he doesn't, to my knowledge, he doesn't believe that we were made by God in his image and all that. We'll still listen to him because we see the common grace that God has given to him to understand a lot about reality, even though he has things wrong. But one of the main reasons we listen to him is because we might ask, where else are we going to go and find that? From maybe we would love to find that from the church, but we just can't anywhere. So that vacuum is what's missing. But I don't want to say, because I don't believe this to be the case. It's not just like these guys are proud, brash, arrogant, and they're jerks, and that's what it means to have a backbone, and that's why guys like them. So I guess if we're gonna define like that, that thing about them that makes people want to follow them, how I don't know, how would you guys say like what that is there?
Well, I mean, I guess if we go back to like, well, if I look at the definition of a jerk is a contemptible and an obnoxious person. Some people may view things that we do as obnoxious just by us standing firm. I think there's a fact of, if I'm gonna say having a backbone for a just spitballing definition, having the courage to stand up for what you believe in, regardless of the consequences. And for some people that may be called being a jerk to say society, to sit there and say what we say is truth. But I think you all honestly start out with humility, and even then you can do have a backbone with humility, but ultimately it comes down to the fact of, and you can say it gently to the point of, hey, we're done. This is the truth, and you have to move on. Like just that willingness to stand firm on something is part of having a backbone. I would say and that's in every area of life.
Yeah. You got to think too that that was like, at least for like Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan, Joe Rogan's had a following for a long time now, but like he has grown exponentially through the whole COVID debacle because of his, slant and perspective through that.
Heterodox stance.
Peterson, and Jordan Peterson grew exponentially because of the free speech movement and all that, as far as his initial following. So like their platforms were built up on the backs of basically these big ideas and stuff that they could stand firm on. And like that's why I was saying earlier, like you have, as far as strong men from the church, they basically, like we have a lot of men that seem like like they don't operate in that same sphere, and they have not taken that stance on there hasn't been like a firm movement that has projected one of them into the same limelight, if that makes sense, like the same platform to take off.
I think and to clarify, we're not saying, just to disclaim one thing, we're definitely not saying that what the evangelical world is somebody who's a Christian to say like everything that Joe Rogan has said about COVID. We just need like that in a Christian form.
Yeah. No.
Because he's wrong about some things. Because he is not all knowing by any means. But what I guess I feel like this is what you're getting at, Ange, is like, I don't know entirely what it would look like for a Christian to have that kind of a platform. But the first step that it takes to get to having that platform is to have the person who's willing to stand on it. And not just men. I think that everybody responds to somebody who is clear in their convictions, humble, and dedicated to them.
Yeah.
And honestly, the American church at large has been far too pragmatic over the last, I don't know, however many years, to where we don't have a lot of those people in the notable places of leadership.
Right. Well, and I would even go back to like, I was listening to another podcast and reading a book about a few other books talking about gravitas, and the concept of, like C.S. Lewis said, we make men without chests, which goes back to even that's like Aristotle, like where the chest is like where our heart is, our gravitas is, which regulates our appetite in our stomachs and our mind, which is purely intellectual. And obviously, like, take that for what it is. And but just the fact that like, even C.S. Lewis wrote that in the 40s. And now we're in the early 2020s, and just that same paradox is still alive. And he saw that happening before now.
Yeah, he saw the phenomenon of that hollowed out manhood type of thing.
Right. Like we don't have any gravitas, we don't have any really even virtue. Like that's where virtue is found. Like if virtue has the fact that we're willingly to regulate what needs to be regulated between the two extremes.
This is one thing that I think is interesting about these three guys. So like, I would say that two essential parts of being a man, being a strong male leader, I would say in particular, would be gravitas and virtue. Gravitas meaning like a weightiness that a person carries, which is a tough thing to define, but I think that we all know people in our lives who have they have a weightiness. When they say something, it carries weight. When they decide to go in a direction, other people listen to it. Like they just have a weightiness. They don't get pushed around or moved around a lot. And then there's the virtue side of it where they actually use that weight in a way that is genuinely good. And what's interesting about these three guys is like, I think Joe Rogan has like an amazing amount of gravitas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if he says something, people listen. If he pushes in a direction, people move. Virtue, not really there. In a lot of ways. He's a pretty hedonistic guy, right? Jordan Peterson, I don't know, he's like somewhere on the spectrum towards virtue, although his definitions of virtue are really interesting. They're like pseudo-Christian, they're like close to Christian. And then with Jocko, it's the same sort of thing. You have this weightiness and you have at least a pretty high amount of virtue going on. In a generic sense, at least. So I don't know what I'm doing with that thought. That just came into my head of how those two aspects, I think, define like the type of person that people want to follow. And it's amazing. And like, that's, I don't know. I mean, that's what we want. That's what we should yearn to be as Christians. Particularly as Christian men, I think.
We've been going back to, if we look at church history, the men that we remember the most, yes, are well thought of now, but were they all well thought of then? Like we can go back to the apostles, and obviously the answer is no, they're all martyred. And then obviously Christ is the prime example. But even like look at our history, like we had the books of martyrs and all that stuff. And other people, like I know I was reading a book on George Mueller. People thought he was crazy. Like he gave up a good life, or other people gave up law degrees and stuff to follow this passion. And they were derided for it by the world. But they had gravity and people did follow them. And ultimately, when we look back in history, we see these people. But I guess it's now, in the thick of all the stuff we're going through, are we willing to stand with the people who are willing to stand up? And are we willing to be the men who stand up?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that pulls people towards us because everyone's looking for that firmness in a society that is so wishy-washy.
Yeah. I mean, my mind goes to Martin Luther.
Right.
And the way that he would have been revered by so many in his time, but hated by so many in his time.
Right.
But
it's they're all polarizing.
But he had an opposite. He had an obvious. He had an obvious backbone to stand against like the whole Catholic Church. He had an obvious backbone that. I don't know. I do think that like we have to constantly walk this fine line, and this isn't just as men. This is just as people. But we have to walk this fine line all the time of not a fine line according to the world of what's winsome versus what is true. But we have to walk the fine line according to God in terms of speaking the truth in love, right? And remembering the context of those verses, right? That's not just about, it's easy for us to make the speaking in truth and love about like, basically being nice.
Being nice.
And it's like, no, it's not about being nice all the time. It's about the rest of that passage is about the body building itself up, which comes through truth. So the truth has to be spoken. And there are times when the truth, I think in my community group, we were just talking about this. I don't remember who said it, but it was like, sometimes the truth will have to be necessarily offensive. And sometimes the truth will not have to be that way, but sometimes it will have to be offensive. It'll have to be stark. And if it's God's truth that you're standing on, you just have to be okay with it being stark.
Mm-hmm.
But you shouldn't also go around trying to do that when you don't need to. You shouldn't be looking for a fight. I mean, Proverbs talks about this. It talks about looking for fights and how foolish that is, but it also talks about standing on what is actually true. And maybe I think the church at large, like, hasn't taught a whole lot specifically about what it means to be a man and how to do that well. And so these guys come into the picture, and they, particularly Jordan Peterson and Jocko Willink, spend a fair amount of time about talking about what it means to be a man and a good man. And that's just missing, I think. And I respectfully think, like, if people in the church, if you look at people who, like, maybe some men in your church that listen to a lot of Jordan Peterson or Jocko Willink, for example, and you kind of think, like, you kind of look down on them thinking that it's, I don't know, it's kind of cute or it's kind of sad how they need this instruction or something. I think you're missing the fact that that's an indication of probably how the church has let those men down, to say, like, no,
Right.
this is what you're supposed to do. Like, this is what you're supposed to be, who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do. I think that has been lacking in a lot of ways at the church. I think I see that hunger when I talk to, so many men, whenever we even get into subjects like that. I think you can see that hunger of, like, wanting to have better advice about things than they've ever gotten before. And I think that for better or worse, this is where a lot of people are going to get that instruction now. So I think it is up to the church to get out of the wishy-washiness and be clear and be loving and be thorough and I don't know, be deep in all the right ways about teaching every member of their congregation what it looks like for them to live out the callings that God has placed on them. You know, men, for how to do it as a man for men, and how to do it as a woman for women. And I think a lack of that has created a pretty big vacuum.
Yeah.
Well, and also one like you said, I think one way, and then encouraging men to encourage women to be women, and women to encourage men to be men.
Mm-hmm.
Like, on the one point, we need to come as a society of believers, come alongside each other, to build each other up in the admonition of the Lord and what He's called us to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be somewhat different given each context of just providence. But there's certain things we can sit there and say, like, hey, this is what we're called to do. Let's work together and just go.
Yeah. You guys got any other thoughts on this, or have we rambled them all out?
I only have one other thought to bring it full circle.
Okay.
That Joe Rogan did have an episode with Nate Bargatze, and they talked about Bigfoot. So
there you go.
And Nate Bargatze is a big man crush on him. And we all do. He's a good guy. He's a
good comedian. I enjoy
funny
him
guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I listen to him a fair amount. Rachel doesn't love him like I enjoy his stuff yet. But
Oh, okay. I was like, have you showed Rachel his podcast?
yeah, she doesn't
I can't
find the appeal of it as much as I do.
We tried to listen. Kaylee doesn't enjoy it either.
I have not listened a ton to it, but it's on my list to get
I think
to.
it's
I've
funny.
listened to Clock a lot.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Kaylee doesn't really laugh much, and but
Well, as per usual, this episode was pretty. This was recorded here in the middle of a week that's been crazy for all of us, and we just kind of kicked this episode out. So, what that means is we probably did say some things that as we listen back to it, we'll think, oh, that didn't make that much sense. Or that wasn't whatever. So give us some
that
great...
predicates the fact that we listened to this episode.
That's not what I meant.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. But give us some grace on that, but also give us your feedback. And let us know things that you think, but follow us and take part in all the fun Instagram polls so that we can bother Jeremy about them in the future. So, yeah.
I'll be honest. I will probably never see them, if I'm honest, until we talk about them on the pod.
That's fair. That's fine.
Yeah. Like the next one could be, will Jeremy see this? And it'll probably be a big fat no.
Yeah, maybe I'll go ahead and put that up there. We'll see. Well, I don't know. The recommendation can just be that Nate Bargatze Bigfoot thing. I guess that's what we'll go with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, if you're looking for content to not like inspirational direction or anything like that, if you're just looking for lighthearted content, then that can be the way to go.
Yeah, that's very much the case. I'll throw out something that's not, maybe it's not lighthearted, but it's not particularly whatever. Is that I was listening to Demonhunter today, and I was listening to an old album by Demonhunter, and I am forgetting what the name of the album is right now, but it's the album that has Undying on it, which is the Triptych. That's the name of the album.
I was gonna say that's what it was.
Yeah,
actually. That's on the tip of my tongue.
I don't even know when it came out at this point. It might have been like 2003, I think. It's so good. It's unbelievable. So that's some advice from
Old
me
school
to you.
Demonhunter, man.
Yeah, that's really good stuff.
I'll go back with just a simple statement of emo's not dead and go from there.
That's yeah. That I showed Jeremy, that popped up on my Spotify today. That was the name of the heading that they were giving to me.
Yeah, we were literally just talking about that the night before, by the way, Faith and I, with her parents. So
well, that's a whole, for the listeners, that's a whole like meme. That's a series of memes on the internet that I don't know, is becoming more popular because people are still listening to the music. So
David, they have a whole cruise for Emo's Not Dead, Might Delete. Like, we should do a 3BT cruise.
They have a whole
one of these
cruise?
days. Yeah, they're doing a cruise this year.
Dang.
With like all the bands. It's
Jeremy,
crazy.
you gonna go?
No, I'm not going. Unless Bigfoot's there, I'll go.
All right. Well, there's a good chance he
This
might
is
be.
derailed.
Yeah, we're done. We're out of here. Go listen to something else that's more stimulating or more interesting than this. So, this is episode 81, and we'll see you guys next time.